we're still not super comfortable talking about sex and sexual problems in a very open manner, especially in religious circles, because sex has been demonized so much over the years, with Puritan culture and things like that. This idea that sex is kind of like this dirty, necessary thing that we have to do to have kids, and it's just sex has gotten a really bad rep over the years, and we haven't really talked enough about why sex is so amazing and what the purpose of it is, and a tremendous gift that we need to steward and talk about.
All right, welcome back to the Men of True Worth podcast. I'm really glad you guys joined us today. I've got a really awesome special guest today. I'm really excited about this show today. I've got Mr. Carl Thomas with me. He is the CEO of XXX Church, as well as the Live Free app, and author of When Shame Gets Real. And this is an awesome book. He's also got series on Right Now Media, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Carl Thomas and let you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing these days, Carl.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. What are we doing these days? That's a lot. Yeah, so Live Free Ministries is the nonprofit that I founded and run, and we have a bunch of different things, all focused around. I would say these days, I would characterize our organization as a mental health organization, but we cater specifically to those who are either struggling with some sort of compulsive sexual behavior or they've been impacted by it. So like a spousal situation, like a sexual betrayal situation. And so we have a bunch of different websites, a bunch of different resources. I think between all our websites, I was calculating it today because of our year end coming up. I think we get, I'm trying to think how many thousand people we get a month. It was a lot. Like XXX Church gets over 2,000 visitors a week. But then between Next Rewatch, small groups, and everything else, I think we're getting somewhere around 5 times that total, right? So about 10,000 a week come to our website, different websites, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think that's 53. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna say short-term memory loss. But we get a lot of people, put it that way, coming to our websites, and so we offer a lot of different resources. All of our resources are focused on some aspect of human connection because we believe that is critical for wellness, right? Whether it's spiritual wellness, physical wellness, mental wellness, sexual wellness, whatever. We need to be connected to people. So, we have online support groups. We have online communities that you can access via mobile app or or computer. We have something called X3Watch, which is it used to be back in the day, it used to be accountability software. Now it's what I would call a bundling service. So basically it bundles different products together that are all focused or in this area. But then you only have one subscription to manage. So we use Ever Accountable software as our accountability software. We bundle in the Live Free community app or a course or so forth and so on. There's different levels of bundles you can subscribe to. And then we have X3 Pure video course. Yeah, so just a lot of different things. But even X3 Watch, even just if you go with the most basic package, which is accountability software and an accountability course, the software only works if you bring someone into your life. So everything we do is connected to some sort of connection piece, right? We don't sell courses by themselves where you're not connecting with somebody. Like that's just not what we do. And then our hope is to eventually offer online counseling, like clinical counseling for people. That's probably several years down the road. I'm actually, running the ministry, doing this, but I'm also going to school for a master's in clinical counseling. So, busy, but that's pretty much what I'm doing.
You guys are making a big impact globally, or you've got a lot of resources, and you're always creating more resources. What I love about what you're saying is that you're pointing back to connecting with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went through my walk of coming out of pornography and things like that, that was one of the things that for me that I share with people that without that accountability with somebody or without somebody there, I think the chances of getting out of it are almost slim to none.
Mhm.
I'll turn that over to you. You're the expert on this. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sometimes we take that as accountability. We stress connection versus accountability, but accountability is a form of connection, or it should be at least. The term accountability can get a little murky because it all depends on how you define it. There's a lot of people that define accountability in a very singular manner, which I don't think is necessarily helpful. It's this idea of I just need someone to call me out when I screw up. And
Mhm.
accountability is like so much bigger than that. It's more about inviting somebody to participate in your life and just being open about what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're choosing, selecting, whatever, questions. Accountability partner doesn't have to only be there when you mess up. They might be there when you're having a good week. You might disagree with them, but you're opening that space up to have those conversations, and but I think the reason accountability partner is so powerful isn't necessarily the fact that they're quote unquote holding you accountable. It's the fact that you have somebody there in theory that you see as a friend, like someone who's willing to accept you for who you are. And that's really what it comes down to. That's what connection's about, right? There's conditional connection and unconditional connection. And a lot of us, like most of the connections we have in our life are all conditional. So we're connected as long as you do something for me, or as long as you perform a certain way, or as long as you behave a certain way. Um, but that's not good, for us psychologically speaking, right? When we're conditionally connected, that creates a lot of anxiety and stress in us, even if it's subconscious, because it's just like there's this awareness that your only source of connection could get severed if you screw up. But when you have unconditional connection, like people that accept you for who you are, it makes you feel more safe, right? Mentally speaking, right? Psychologically speaking, you feel comfortable because it's like, okay, hey, I'm good. Someone's got me. Even if I mess up, they're still there for me. And that's huge from a mental health perspective, right? Having that awareness that there's people in your life that got you, no matter what happens. That's really important. So anyway, but yeah, I think that's why so many people struggle with this stuff is because they try to continue to struggle with this stuff is because they try to do it on their own. They try to freeze people out, or they try to take the easy way. So like I'll read a book, or I'll do a course. Even I think counseling is super important. I think you need to have I think, gosh, I would recommend it to anybody who's struggling. Well, I'd recommend counseling to anybody, even if you feel like you're totally healthy. Like just having that check-in is good. But uh, guys that they only do counseling, but they don't do anything else. I think they struggle a little bit because they're getting the counseling, but they're getting, so it's a form of connection, but it's again, if you don't pay your counselor, you're going to lose the connection. It's a professional connection. There's no authentic, like, hey, you're just with me no matter what. So I think even when people hook up with a counselor, they still need like a support community or some sort of support mechanism that's going to allow them to, tap into other people who can come alongside them and help them. So yeah, if you're doing it by yourself, I would say 99.999% certainty, like you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. Like you need to have
Wow.
people in your life. Like that's a psychological reality, and a lot of it goes back to in our from our perspective, a lot of it goes back to that's the reason why we struggle in the first place with a lot of this stuff is because of the fact that we have attachment issues and things like that. Like we don't know how to deal with the fact that we feel alone or we feel vulnerable. So we use these things to kind of, I hate to use the term medicate because that indicates like that it's helpful, right? But that's usually the term that gets thrown around. But we use it as like an escape mechanism or a regulation mechanism, right? Like I'm not feeling good right now. What's going to help me smooth out? I know what'll help me smooth out porn, and it does the trick, for a little while, right? I mean that's the reality.
I I love some of those words that you're using, inviting somebody to participate in your life and unconditional connection.
Yeah.
Like that's such a powerful thing. And some of the things that you're talking about, it really resonates with me. And my journey in that was really, and I think that's why I'm drawn to the things that you guys do, is like that was my journey. Is like I didn't want to be around other men. I didn't want to connect with people. I like didn't want to get in groups or anything like that. But once I started walking out of that, it's like that was now God told me, get around other men, start surrounding yourself with people. And that's why that connection piece that you're talking about is really resonates with me. So I thank you for bringing that up. Now, I understand that a lot of the work you do is not necessarily all Christian based. Is that right?
So, well, first of all, we're 501(c)(3). So we're classified as a religious like a parachurch type organization, right? So
Right.
we have the people on our board are all Christian, and we have pastors and therapists and other different people. I'm a pastor and a Christian. So we're a Christian organization, but I would say, I tell people like we're not an organization that's just for Christians. So,
Right.
XXX Church is there to help anybody. Live Free Community is there to help anybody. Our small groups online program is there to help anybody. We want to welcome anybody from any walk of life because we're just trying to help them imp- improve their mental wellness, if you will, right? We're trying to help them try to get out of this addictive lifestyle that they're in because the mental health aspect of it is the big problem. The pornography, sex, masturbation, whatever, that's the little problem. It feels like a big problem, and it
Mhm.
could be, right, because it might be blowing up your life, but the reality is that it's still a little problem in the fact that it's stemming from another underlying issue that's much greater, right? And so if you don't take care of that underlying issue, um, the little problem's going to probably continue to exist, or even if it doesn't, you might be more prone to relapse in the future because once that thing starts getting out of hand again, it doesn't take much for your brain to go back to what it knows works well, right? So but I would say we embrace integration, right? Spiritual, like what you would call spiritual integration. So we believe in the value of clinical counseling. We believe in, not all components of all psychological theory, but we definitely embrace components of psychological theories. We definitely believe in the value of certain types of psychological interventions, and things like that. So, I mean, talk about attachment theory, which isn't a Christian subject per se, polyvagal theory, all these things, like they're not Christian. They're more from the world of science, but they can be integrated into a Christian perspective and better understood. And part of that was the old saying, chew the meat, spit out the bones. I mean, even I know it sounds a little crazy, but one of the reasons that psychology gets such a bad rap with a lot of Christians is because they associate with someone like Freud, who was like an atheist, or I don't know if he was a flat out atheist or if he was just non-religious in general. But regardless, he definitely had atheistic beliefs, if you will. Like he didn't believe in God. He thought religion was like a pacifier type thing. And Freud was, in my opinion, a little crazy. I mean, he definitely had some serious issues. But even when you look at Freud stuff, I mean, there are aspects of it that are actually pretty interesting and psychologically sound, right? Like you know, I think he put a weird spin on some of the stuff, but the concept itself was pretty spot on when you learn how a person works, right? Like, so, we do have a conscious and a subconscious, and we do have certain needs that we strive to meet. And like the funny thing is like, and I think, personally, I think Freud was probably a sex addict because of some of his tendencies and things. I mean, he used to sleep with patients, things like that. But it's funny because one of the things he identified as a chief human need was sex. And I laugh because I'm like, yeah, you know what? If you're a guy who's steeped in sexual addiction, that's how you see it, right? My chief need is
Right.
sex, right? But that's not actually the case. Your chief need is connection. It's just that for a person who's steeped in sexual addiction, that's how you get your connection, right? So you identify connection, you equate the two. It's like well, I have to have sex. No, you actually have to have connection, but sex is a powerful form of connection. And then when you can't get legitimate connection with another human being that's outside of a sexual realm, you choose to connect with pornography or something. But it is still a form of connection at some level. So it's funny when you read his stuff. If you read it through a Christian perspective, you see that there's actually a lot of gold in there with the other stuff, right? But you got to learn
Right.
how to pick and choose. Like some of you just got to be like, that's crazy. No, he was nuts there. But this is actually pretty interesting, and I do believe that there were some good things that he actually came up with. So yeah, so we're definitely what you would call an integrative model of recovery.
Yeah. And I really like all the messages you guys put out. And so, and specifically when you're talking about, I'm going to tie into a little bit because I don't want to go too far before we start talking about your book a little bit. Now, in When Shame Gets Real,
Hmm.
you really talk about the connection between shame and addiction
Hmm.
and how it fuels some of the struggles and unhealthy sexual behaviors.
Hmm.
And a lot of that, I'll get your, um, do you see that a lot of that shame is what is stopping us from connecting?
Hmm.
Is that
Yeah,
where
oh,
you,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think shame is gosh, it's shame is such a evil entity, if you will. I mean, it's powerful because so it's funny when if you've been in this ministry type of sphere of ministry for a while, one common thing you hear a lot about is end the shame, right? And like so, shame is kind of pitched at you as like this byproduct of compulsive sexual behavior, right? You feel this way, therefore you feel shame. So if you stop doing this stuff, you won't have the shame anymore. But the reality is, it's like shame is much bigger than that because shame is not just the result; it's also the precursor, right? So shame is one of the primary reasons that we resort to things like sex or alcohol or drug or whatever. Like it's one of the main reasons that we choose to regulate with what you call maladaptive coping mechanisms. And but ironically, those coping mechanisms also produce more shame, which then so it's like this vicious cycle, right? It's like
right?
um think about it like it's unique, but think about it as like shame is the gasoline that causes the fire, but then the fire produces more gasoline that further feeds the fire. It's pretty crazy, but that's how powerful shame can be. So, and yeah, it's one of the reasons I'd say it's one of the primary reasons that we kind of go to these drift towards these behaviors in the first place. But it's also one of the reasons, yeah, that we kind of shy away from things like connection and support and being transparent about our feelings because we're fearful that if we are seen for who we really are, we're going to face even more rejection, right? So,
Yeah.
it's that it's just weird how it kind of feeds on each other, right? It's like we need connection. We don't feel like we're worth that connection, right? We don't feel like we're worth up someone's time. So we resort to something else, and then we don't want the people that we actually want. Like we want it, we want connection, but then we deny connection because we're afraid that we're going to get more rejection, which then is going to further reinforce the fact that we're not worthy of connection, right? So it's just like this around, and it's
Yeah.
once you get kind of sucked into that vicious cycle, it's really hard to get out, right?
It's really hard. And the shame aspect that you're talking about is, I'm so glad you're talking about how powerful that shame aspect is. It's like it feeds the addiction, and the addiction continues with the shame. I've got a question about this that um don't some of the Christian beliefs and the Christian circles sort of exacerbate the shame and
Oh
even
yeah.
even make it bigger, a bigger deal
Yeah,
than it is.
for
Uh,
sure. For sure. I mean, like I don't mean to cut you off, but absolutely. I mean, like I me and this one guy who's on my board, he's a therapist. We kind of joke around about it's not really a joke. We joke about it, but it's not really a joke. That a big part of our job is helping people with church hurt, trying to re-educate people. I'd say half my responsibility, half the time when people come into our community, I feel like half my energy is spent on trying to unbrainwash some of these really toxic beliefs that people bring with them into their recovery journey, right? Because they've been fed a bunch of stuff, and it's like, man, it's not like that, So, yeah, the church, like, man, I mean, I'm not bashing. I know it sounds like it, and then
no,
not every church is like this. I mean, I know some churches that are fantastic. There's one church up in Calgary that my buddy's a pastor up there, and we actually went up there, me and my wife, and did a whole weekend of stuff there. And like they're really open about it, and they really embrace the conversations, and they really try to do their best to erase the shame. So, it's not every organization out there, but there's a lot of them, and the damage they do is it's not just significant, but it's far reaching, or it's widespread, because it's not just in one thing. It's a lot of things. Like there's a lot of bad teaching out there that make pornography basically it's like a behavior self-control issue, right? Like if you weren't so horny, you wouldn't have these problems, and you just need to contain it and learn how to be a more of a man, right? I mean, in essence, there's a very famous book out that I won't mention the name, that I can't stand, that most people, when they hear it, they're like, oh yeah, I got my son this book back, because it's been around for 30 years. It's like, yeah, if you want, do you think that's a good book, Carl? And I'll tell people, well, if you want to screw them up even more, yeah, sure, it's a great book, right? Because it's just the wrong messaging. Or they'll come in with this idea that pornography addiction is basically a byproduct of spiritual decline. And I don't believe that. I mean, there's
right.
obviously a spiritual component to all this stuff, but you're not looking at porn because you're a terrible Christian. Like, it's just not the case. I work with a lot of guys. I work with pastors who I lead a pastors group. And I'll tell you right now, some of the guys in that, all the guys in that group, as far as I know, but some of them, I mean, their love for God is profound. Like, you can tell they're really
Right.
committed. Um, and they're not, they're doing pretty well, but even when they slip up, it's not because they don't love God or they're choosing to be rebellious per se. It's because they're still trying to work through issues, and sometimes their biology gets the best of them, and they that maybe something happens, they have a fight with their wife, it kind of sends them over the edge a little bit, and that lizard brain kicks in, and before you know it, they're going down the path, and it's like, oh wait a minute, I can't go here, but that's what their brain wants, because it's going to help make them feel good in the moment. And I tell guys all the time, like, listen, it's possible to be completely devoted to your wife and God and still be addicted to porn. Now, again, there's some dynamics there that need to be addressed, right? Like, so I'm not saying that it's okay, or that obviously it doesn't impact the
Right.
marriage, or it doesn't impact your spiritual relationship or growth or whatever. There's certainly a lot of interrelated components, but it's not a causal thing. It's not a causation thing, right? You don't look at porn because you're a bad husband, or you don't look at porn because you're a bad Christian, right? And so some of these messages we get from the church about some of the reasons we look at porn, they're very shame inducing. And then beyond that, it's the fact that we don't want, or we don't offer a lot of resources around this stuff or
Right.
whatever. So we further reinforce the fact that this is like something that you should kind of feel dirty about, because we don't really want to talk about it in church. And
I
it's
feel like,
a significant issue. Like, how do you not talk about it? Right.
yeah, and I feel like one of the reasons that we don't talk about it is because there's such a fear of accepting. Like if we start to have the conversation in the churches, then it's almost as if we're accepting that that people are doing this.
Yeah.
And it's almost we want to pretend like it's not happening or something. I don't know. Um, that's but it's like but what would be your opinion on why is there such a gap of like why can't we talk about this and really address it as a legitimate thing in a Christian circles more? I know some
Yeah.
are, I know I'm aware of that. I'm just saying like more prevalent. I think we've made a lot of strides with ministries like you guys and stuff like that in the recent years, but what has been stopping us for so long from having these conversations in the churches?
Yeah, some of this is going to come off sounding like really like I'm a real skeptic, but it's like there's a mixed bag. I mean, first of all, some of it just comes down to the fact that not even as a church, but even as a society, we still don't really, we're still not super comfortable talking about sex and sexual problems in a very open manner, right? Even in non-Christian circles, people say, "Oh, we're really open about sex," but they're open about sex to a degree, but not entirely, but especially in religious circles because sex has been demonized so much over the years, with Puritan culture and things like that. Not purity culture, that too, but Puritan, like way back when. It's like this idea that sex is kind of like this dirty, necessary thing that we have to do to have kids, and it's just sex has gotten a really bad rep over the years, and we haven't really talked enough about why sex is so amazing and what the purpose of it is and how it actually is like a tremendous gift that we need to steward and talk about. So part of it just comes from, like I said, a cultural aversion to it, right? It's like it's kind of a taboo subject. It makes us feel uncomfortable. Um, it's funny. At one event, I do this thing. It's kind of like a warm up tool, and I go through a list of words. It's at men's breakfast, and I go through a list of words, and they're just generic words like macaroni and firehouse, and I have them repeat it after me, and then I switch it up on them, and like the first word I say is vagina, and like everybody like the mood in the room shifts, right? And then I go, and, the penis, semen, and I start using all these sexual terms and people get a little squirmy. And I point out the fact that that happened. It's like, why did that happen? Because those are legit biological terms: vagina, penis, semen. They're no different than elbow, knee. I mean, they're
Yeah.
legit biological
Well, I'm
terms.
getting squirmy. Well, why is that?
Right. But that's like there's actually and I talk about it in the book, but there was actually a study. I forgot where it was, Bristol. I know this, but I can't remember right now. But there was actually a study done where they got a bunch of people together, um, and they hooked them up to electrodes, and they had them read through a bunch of what you would call generic everyday words, right? Then they switched, and they didn't go to sexual terms per se. They went to curse words and things like that, like things that were basically seen as socially unacceptable, right? And the minute they started reading those words, the electrical activity in their skin actually increased. So that's why, like, when you start saying those words, you feel a little weird. Like, it's because there's actually, partly at least, partly because there's actually a increase in electrical activity in your skin, right? Because those terms are seen as socially unacceptable, which that's the problem
Hmm.
is why are those terms socially unacceptable? Like we feel weird about it because society has told us to feel weird about it, but there's nothing really to feel weird about. I mean, this is just life, right? I have an elbow and I have a penis. It's, whatever, right? There's no need to get all weirded out about it. I mean, you don't need to be talking about your penis with your accountant, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's normal stuff, right? So part of it's that with the church. Part of it's like what you said. I think people just we want to live in our pretend worlds and pretend like everything is amazing, and we don't really want to talk about what's going on behind the scenes because if we admit that there's a problem, now everything gets real, and now we got to deal with the unpleasantness. And people in general don't want to deal with unpleasantness, right? We avoid that. And then, quite honestly, and this is where it sounds really skeptical, but honestly, it's just not good for business. You know, people, if you want to drive down tithing and attendance, get up and start talking about sexual issues every weekend, and people are going to leave, right? I mean, because people want to hear about inspiring things, they don't want to hear necessarily about this or that. So it's not good. It having a financial fitness 5 week seminar at your church, people will come to, and they might even pay for tickets. Having a 5 week seminar on sexual health, you're going to get a much lower attendance, and you might not be able to charge at all. So it's just kind of the economics of it too. So
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought this point. It's like that it really is a catering to what is being consumed. It's like we create things based on demand.
yeah,
And so I'm glad you brought that point.
yeah,
But what can any church leaders or anybody like that do to make a shift
yeah. I mean,
for their
unfortunately,
community? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's not like a simple switch, right? It's kind of a culture thing where you just got to start trying to either and some of it's going to come from the front, some of it's going to come through programs and resources, some of it's going to come through your small group leaders, whatever. But yeah, you just got to kind of try to shift the culture in the church where it's, hey, we're a place that's willing to talk about this stuff in a real and authentic manner, and we're not going to shy away from it. And I mean, it takes time though, right? It's not going to happen overnight. But I mean, there was a time when admitting that you're an alcoholic was very, you didn't do that, right? And church didn't want to talk about alcoholism, and then drugs. And it's just funny. Now we're at a point where you can go into any church and say, yeah, I was a chronic drug abuser, and everybody pats you on the back and says, wow,
Right.
that's what an amazing testimony. And they'll you want to write a book about it, but sex, not so much, right? We're still quite not there. But that all came with gradual work in trying to normalize this stuff. And when you use the word normalize, it kind of turns people off a little bit, because by saying that sex and porn
Because
are
we don't want
normal,
to accept it. Because it
right? Well, normal doesn't mean healthy or good. It just
right.
means normal, right? So like masturbating is pretty normal. Looking at porn is actually pretty normal, right? It's not necessarily healthy for you or good, or godly, right? But it's
Mhm.
normal, right? You're not an abnormal individual for doing these things. It's
Right.
kind of what life is. And so we just need to address the fact that this is kind of a normal behavior, but it's not necessarily a good behavior. And it's not necessarily a healthy behavior. And it goes back to the idea of I mean, you could apply it to almost any area of life, right? I mean, one of the reasons that mental health is still kind of a stigmatized thing is because people assume that if you're once you bring up the topic of mental health and having to see a counselor, the idea is that you're broken or dysfunctional. And it's, well, to a degree, but not really. Like, no, like what you're dealing with, anxiety, bouts of depression, some of this stuff, like to a degree, obviously, but these things are all kind of normal challenges we all face from a day on a
Right.
daily basis. And so it's pretty normal, developmentally speaking, to deal with some of this stuff. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to accept it. We can try to do things to help improve. Being overweight is relatively normal in America. I mean, it is, you're not a reject because you have a large waistline. Like that's just kind of a normal thing. But is it healthy for you? No. Is it something that you might want to work on? Sure, for your own benefit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something broken about you. It's kind of what it
Right.
is. So you just got to accept the fact or normalize the fact that this stuff's going on, and it's pretty typical. But we can do better.
And these words, like when you talk about when you bring up these certain words, like any sexual terms or anything like that, and people get a little like jittery or it kind
Mhm.
of changes the tone in the room. That was one thing that anytime if I'm sharing with a group, I point back to this time I shared this message about being a dangerous warrior for men. And that was what the message was about. But there was a part where I shared a part of my journey out of pornography. And after the message, it was a very small piece, but that's the only thing anybody can remember from that message.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things is like it once it's mentioned and I'm going to be really honest, sometimes I stay away from the subject because once it's mentioned, it becomes this huge elephant in the room and it takes away everything else that was said. And what you're talking about with those words, that makes a lot of sense.
I was just thinking, I actually wasn't going to say anything, but since you brought it up, I mean, you know, I think there's a reason potentially that that's what they believe, like what comes up. It's like you could read it as it's distraction, right?
Right.
Or maybe the reason that people remember that so much is because what stands out from them is the fact that you were really authentic about something that not a lot of people are authentic about. So that's really different from what you're used to hearing. I've gone to
That makes
thousands of
sense.
church services over my life, and I've heard tons of messages on grace and I don't know, all sorts of stuff. Heck, I mean, I love my pastor, and if he's listening, forgive me, Mike, but I mean, I'll be honest, I have a hard time remembering what he talked about 2 days ago or 3 days ago, right? Because so much of this stuff is just more of the same. I mean, you might put a little spin on it. The things that really stand out to me, the things that I still remember are messages that either really resonated with me or where something just about it was really different. I was like, wow, okay, like that caught my attention.
Uh,
So, one of my buddies, he's a marriage coach now, but he used to be a pastor, and he was actually, I'm not going to get into it now because we don't have the space and time, but he's a really big part of my recovery journey, actually. And he didn't even realize it at the time. And I didn't know him when he came to our church to guest speak. But I remember he gets up and he starts talking about being all in for God. And, I'm just like, okay, whatever. And then he flashes up this picture of poker chips and he starts talking about pushing all in and poke. And I was a poker junkie. And so that caught my attention. I'm like, hey, here's a guy, a pastor, and he's talking about poker. Like this guy's all right. I can resonate with this guy a little bit, right? And then he started talking about Guinness and like so there were these things that like resonated, and I'm like, okay, I can relate to this guy. And so I still remember a lot of his message because I could relate to him. And there were things about that message that really stood out to me that were like, okay, that's a memorable moment. So you get up, you start talking about marriage, you start about this, start talking about that. It might be really good content, but when you bring up a really vulnerable part of your life that very few people are willing to talk about, that's going to stand out, right? That's going to stand out.
yeah.
People are going to remember it. And I don't think, I mean, maybe, but I would imagine that most of the people probably remember it for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons. So it's not, ew, I can't believe Mike did that. It's like, wow, I can't believe he had the friggin' nuts to say that. Pardon my language, but you know what I'm saying? Like, seriously though, that's probably what
No,
they're thinking. Like, I can't believe the guy had the guts to say that. Wow, good on him. Like that type of thing stands out. So I'd say there's a good reason that you know uh,
that's
that
yeah,
those
that's
shares
pretty encouraging.
are what people
Right.
remember because not a lot of people talk about that stuff.
Right. And I that's why I really like a lot of what you're saying here is because it's important that we have these conversations
Yeah,
and we're not afraid. Um, and what we're talking to a Christian audience here for the most part. It's like we're not afraid to talk about these things in a Christian context, like
yeah.
in these groups and things like that. So but I'm kind of curious because you've got so much experience with the groups, with the counseling that you guys are going in, with your book, with everything that you've done. Um, if somebody's stuck right now, they're stuck in that shame. They're stuck in that place where they don't really feel like they have anybody who who just for unconditional connection. They don't have
Mhm.
anybody that they can turn to or right now. How can they find that person and what steps should they take right now?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question because there's not everybody we're talking to isn't necessarily dealing with sex addiction. So, um, but I would say guys that are struggling with pornography or things like that, joining a support group or something like that, this is a good place to start. Can building connection takes a lot of effort, and it also takes a lot of courage. Like personal, because you are putting yourself out there, right? And there is a risk that you might face rejection for sure, because there's a lot of flawed people out there. We're all flawed, so not everybody's going to accept you for who you are, and that it takes some courage to be able to say, okay, hey, you know what, I'm going to put myself out there, and I realize I might get some rejection, but that's okay, because when I find that who are willing to like embrace me and accept me for who I am and encourage me and like I can really form a strong connection with, it'll be worth the my investment of time. But yeah, it can be really hard to find that in just regular society. We're a digital world, so we tend to not engage in live things, right? Everything's
Mhm.
online, which is not at all super. Social media is not really a good form of connection. Um, Churches, you can find a good source of connection, maybe in certain churches, certain groups, but again, you got to search because not everybody in church wants to really get real and raw about life, and not everybody in church is going to accept you for who you are, unfortunately. So I would say, yeah, look for support groups, look for support communities, things like that, where whatever you're dealing with, if you're, let's just say your issue is not pornography, but your issue is, I don't know, anxiety, right? Look for an anxiety support group. Look for, because when you join up with these support groups, one of the many benefits of these support groups is the fact that what you're dealing with is normalized, right? You realize there's other people that are dealing with this, and they all share many of the same experiences, concerns, issues that you are facing, and that you're not really alone in all this, and that some of the things that you're really struggling with, other people are struggling with, and so that creates a pretty unique bond, that you can have. So I think there's support groups and support organizations out there for all sorts of things. Start there, and then hopefully you can grow and learn and expand it to other areas of your life. I kid around. I'm not kidding though, really. That's the thing. But I like with our app, for instance, the Live Free Community app, I say it's like training wheels for life, right? Like what you're dealing with stuff that you don't want to talk about in your church or with your family or with your friends because you feel really embarrassed and shameful about it. And you shouldn't feel that way, but it's easier said than done. So how about you start in a supportive community where you're not going to get shunned, start talking about it, and then you're going to learn over time that, hey, this stuff actually isn't as scary as I thought. People will accept me, even though I might be flawed. And then you might start learning how to actually draw healthy boundaries and how to differentiate and things like that. And then you can take those skills into other circles of life and apply them there, you know? So
Yeah.
it's not going to
I
happen.
wanted to,
It's
yeah,
not
I
going to happen
wanted to take them
immediately.
there. Yeah, sorry. I did want to take them there because you mentioned that, but I do definitely want to, all these things that you're talking about, there's a lot of resources on your the Live Free Community dot it's dot org, right? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, livefreecommunity.org. Yeah.
yeah, live like there's a lot of resources there that people can find where they can get started. That's kind of what you're
Yeah.
saying, right?
Yeah, but like I said, I'm not even trying to plug our
Yeah,
stuff. I'm just saying in general, like when we feel
yeah.
alone, very, very likely there's some other forms of dysfunction going on in our life, right? Because we it's just a bad place to be when you don't really feel like you have anybody. So maybe you're not using pornography and sex as a means of self-regulation, but you might be doing something else. It's pretty common, right? That we're going to substitute and use things to try to make ourselves feel normal throughout the days just so we can survive. So, if pick your poison, but if it's a different thing, look for support organizations or groups or whatever that deal with that and try to get plugged in there. You'll find people that you can relate to, and then, like I said, over time you can start to hopefully learn some of these social skills that you can use in other areas of life. So then it's, hey, you know what? I don't feel awkward talking about anxiety with this group of people. So I really shouldn't have to feel awkward talking about anxiety with this group of people over here. And if they don't like it, that's their problem, not mine. Right? Like you start to learn things about the fact that, hey, what I'm dealing with, it's unfortunate, but it's just a fact of life, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about. I'm working on it, right? And so, if you have a problem with that, that's your problem, not my problem. I'm doing what I need to do, you know?
Man, this is really good. And yeah, I definitely encourage anybody who, if they are, and I know you're not here to sell your stuff or anything like that or push anything that you're doing, but I'm just really a big believer in the things that you guys have put out there,
Thank you.
and it's just such good content. And it's not just good content, it's life-changing material and life-changing practices that you're leading people into. And so I'm just really, really, I'm a big believer in it. And like inviting somebody into to participate in your life, this unconditional acceptance. These are big, big things that we really need in life. And I'm
Yep.
just really, like I say, I'm a big believer in what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Um, at the Live Free app, XXX Church, all of this, when shame gets real, this is just awesome stuff. And I really thank you for coming on today. I do want to give you a couple minutes, Carl, if you would, anybody who's listening here, what kind of, if you'd like to summarize some of what you said, or if anything was missed, or if you just want to speak to whoever's listening, if you'd take a couple minutes and whatever message you really want people to hear
Yep.
from this.
Yeah, I think as human beings, we don't really fully appreciate the value of relationships in terms of how it makes us feel safe, right? And safety, when you use the word safety or fear, we tend to think in very generic terms like, oh, I feel safe. I'm sitting here in my, my whatever room, I feel safe. Like I don't feel afraid or scared. But from a, psychological or neurological perspective, like safety is like this idea of, hey, I'm regulated, right? I'm not my spidey sense, you know, going off, right? I feel good. I'm anchored is another term you sometimes use. And and it's so valuable in so many areas of life. And so having connection in our life is so important because it allows us to remain in a regulated, anchored state, which then allows us to act more logically, more value driven. We can thrive in that type of state when we're good. But when we're on high alert, right, and the alarms are going off, it's very difficult to exist in an optimal state, right? Because we're in survival mode, so we're just going to do what's expedient. And so, my encouragement would just be, hey, look at your life and really try to invest in invest the time, effort, if it requires it, money, whatever, to find those people in your life that you can really connect with and really strengthen those connections, because that's going to really help you live a more anchored lifestyle. It's I was thinking about with my wife, and you know I forgot. I was thinking about like why is our what what is it about our marriage that I think is so great, right? Because I'm really happily married. My wife and I think are doing really well, and it's like, man, what is it about us, And for me, it all comes down to the fact that I feel safe with her. Like that's huge. It's like I
Wow.
know that no matter what happens, she's got my back. And so that's more important than anything. I mean, anything, it's like that safety is really significant. And, when I really thought about it, I was like, yeah, that's how do I define my marriage? It's safe, like not comfortable.
Mhm.
It can be uncomfortable at times, right? We have to grow, but it's safe. I know I'm good. I know she's got my back and I got hers. And that's huge, and so that's something we really need. And yeah, if you're struggling with pornography or sex or anything like that, you need connection. And when you get sources of connection in your life, it really can change the game.
that is just really cool. And I love what you're talking about. And a lot of what I'm hearing here is invest time and energy in genuine connection.
Mhm.
Like actually find these connections that are going to just it's unconditional connection.
Mhm.
That's really cool. And I thank you for sharing also about your wife and stuff. Like how that's such a great support system for you. Thank you, Carl. I really appreciate you coming on today. Um, and
Yeah, my
I just really
pleasure.
honor your time. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey,
And
thanks for having me on. It was great. I
uh,
appreciate it.
and all of you watching, thank you for, if you made it this far, go ahead and like and subscribe, comment, talk to us. But go to livefreecommunity.org, XXXchurch.com, and then go get his book, When Shame Gets Real. I know Carl's not big on selling and pushing his stuff, but man, he's got some really good stuff in here. So I definitely encourage you guys, go get this book on Amazon. It's just awesome. But Carl, thank you so much for today.
Yeah, man. Thank you again. It was good. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
All right. See you.
Bye.
Bye.